If you are into meditation and mindfulness, you will know that the practices came from roots in ancient traditions of Hinduism and Buddhism in India. You will know that even more if you listen to last week's episode of Exploring Brain and Mind, because I did a first episode on the topic of meditation and mindfulness, going into practices and into the origins. And this week is a second episode on the topic of meditation and mindfulness. However, today I'm broadening the scope and the lens to look at traditions from around the world with similarities to what we know as meditation and mindfulness, because practices from those cultures, different cultures, may well echo mindfulness and meditation in profound ways. I have always been curious about other cultures, how people in other corners of the world live and think, and I think it is important to be open, be curious about the lives of different people in other countries and cultures, which I think contributes to a better understanding, to a better acceptance and tolerance towards others. So let's go exploring. I start the episode by looking at the Indigenous parallels and how important it is to recognize that practices resembling meditation and mindfulness exist far beyond Asia. Many Indigenous cultures have long embraced ways of being deeply present, connected to nature, and attentive to the balance between mind, body, and spirit. So let's first look at some key similarities of meditation and mindfulness with Indigenous peoples' practices, and then we look at examples from some Indigenous cultures. A first core similarity is the present moment awareness. A central tenet of mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Many Indigenous practices share this same focus, emphasizing a deep, mindful awareness of one's surroundings, the community, as well as the present experience. This is not just a personal exercise, but a communal one, where being fully present is crucial for rituals, for ceremonies, and for daily life. Another important core similarity is the connection to nature. Modern mindfulness often uses nature as a setting or focus for practice. For example, when you're going on walking meditations, or when you just go on a walk and you've been mindful of your surroundings. For many Indigenous cultures, this connection is fundamental to their worldview and spirituality. Their practices are not just inspired by nature, they are a direct engagement with it, recognizing the interconnectedness of all living things. And with some cultures, we have to include even the weather, the water, the earth, everything into living things, because in the end, everything is alive. The next core similarity is a holistic well-being. Both mindfulness and Indigenous practices see health as a holistic concept encompassing the body, mind, and spirit. Illness is often viewed as a disruption of balance, and practices are designed to restore harmony within the individual, the community, and with the natural world. Next core similarity is a non-judgmental observation. Mindfulness encourages observing thoughts and feelings without getting caught up in them, without giving them meaning, without reacting to them, without paying too much attention to them. Similarly, many Indigenous practices such as vision quests or ceremonies involve a state of quiet contemplation and deep listening, allowing for insight and guidance to arise without the interference of ego or judgment. And another key core similarity is the use of ritual and repetition. Meditation often involves repetitive elements like breath work, mantras, or body scans to focus the mind. Indigenous practices frequently use repetitive drumming, chanting, dance, or rituals to achieve a similar state of focused awareness and altered consciousness. Indigenous wisdom and the body-mind connection. Indigenous practices often emphasize the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit. Practices such as shamanic journeying, sweat lodge ceremonies, and nature-based rituals can induce such altered states of consciousness and promote healing. The concept of deep listening in many indigenous cultures is a form of mindfulness applied to communication and connection with the natural world. The use of entheogens in some indigenous cultures has been used for spiritual purposes. And I have to quote Google here for a second because I had to look up what an entheogen was. My thinking was right that it was something similar to psychedelics. So Google says entheogens are psychoactive substances, both natural and synthetic, used in spiritual, shamanic, or religious contexts to induce altered states of consciousness and facilitate spiritual experiences. Thank you, Google. By the way, I did not bother to look up the differences between psychedelics and entheogens now, because in the context, it's enough to know what entheogens are. It's important to note that these practices are very specific to those cultures, to each of those cultures. They all have separate practices, but they all might have different entheogens or psychedelics or whatever they're using. Such practices should also be approached with respect and never experimented with outside of those cultures, and never without guidance of people from that culture. You don't want this kind of thing to go wrong. Now let's have a look at examples from indigenous cultures. And the information provided gives a general overview. It is important to remember that each of these indigenous cultures is incredibly diverse with many unique traditions and practices. I start the exploration with the Native Americans. Many Native American traditions have practices that mirror mindfulness and meditation. The key difference is often the communal and ceremonial context, which is deeply rooted in a sense of connection to the land and to ancestors. One of their practices is vision quests. It's a rite of passage in many tribes. A vision quest involves a period of solitude, fasting, and prayer in nature. The goal is to seek guidance and wisdom from the spirit world. This practice requires a profound level of present moment awareness and non-judgmental observation of one's inner and outer landscape. And there's the practice of smudging, the practice of burning sacred plants like sage or cedar is a ritual used to cleanse and purify a space or person. It is often performed before ceremonies or meditation to create a sacred and mindful environment. And drumming and chanting is very common among Native Americans. The rhythmic beat of the drum is often referred to as the heartbeat of the earth. Drumming and chanting is used in ceremonies to induce a meditative state, to connect with the spiritual realm, and to unify the community. And if anyone wants to explore further on the subject of similarities of Native American cultures with meditation and mindfulness, those sources are one article in Psychiatric News. That article is called Mindfulness Has Parallels to Indigenous Cultural Practices. And the second source is Mindful Indigenous Roots. Next, we're looking at the Indigenous cultures from the Pacific. I have a separate section on the Hawaiians. They're part of that as well, but I give them a special attention because I'm very kind of engrossed in learning about Hawaiian culture, history, traditions, customs, everything to do with it. So similar to the Native Americas, the Pacific cultures have long had practices that are very similar to mindfulness and meditation. The indigenous Pacific people have deep connection to the land and sea with the use of chants, and they do deep breathing during long canoe voyages and other daily activities. The concept of haora in Maori culture, for example, emphasizes holistic well-being. And here's the special bit about the Hawaiians. The indigenous Hawaiian worldview is based on a deep sense of interconnection, which is beautifully reflected in their practices. They have special names for different kinds of rain. They have special names for different clouds. They create different names for sometimes things that are kind of just nuances different from other things, but they really emphasize small differences as it is important to them. And important to them is to understand the land, to live with the land. They see the land as the chief, and they, the people, we, the people, are the servants to the chief, to the land. I have to add one bit to the special connection to the sea as well. I don't know if you have heard that the Hawaiians, Tahitians and people as well, I suppose, they can navigate the ocean simply by understanding the stars, the weather, how the waves are, the streams, how the ocean works. It is absolutely fascinating. Considering that we Western people have lost a huge amount of knowledge and connection with nature, and to hear and read and learn about that there are still cultures and people about in other parts of the world that still have this strong connection, it tells me that this connection to nature is essential and important for humans, much more important than the connection to technology, to chemicals, to artificial stuff, and how nature is part of us and we are part of nature, and it's not the other material, artificial stuff that we should put a lot of attention to. Rant over. Let's look at some Hawaiian practices. Here is Ho'oponopono mentioned first, and it means to make right. This ancient Hawaiian practice is a process of reconciliation and forgiveness. It involves 4 key phrases. And another word of warning before I start. These phrases is like the westernized version of Ho'oponopono. I give you the originals right afterwards. So those 4 phrases are when you go back to teachings of Ihaleakala Hugh Len and Joe Vitale in his book, Zero Limits. That is where these 4 phrases come from. So the 4 phrases are, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. It is not the original Hawaiian Ho'oponopono, it is the westernized one. The original Hawaiian Ho'oponopono is, if people have a grievance with each other, there might be a mediator. The mediator is the person in the middle with the group gathering around. The mediator asks everyone to speak about the problem that they're having with each other, all one after another. Then they have to work out a solution, and the solution will then have to be agreed on. It's another brief version to the proper process. I think the proper process is even longer. But just to state how there is a difference between the westernized Ho'oponopono and the proper Hawaiian Ho'oponopono. So Ho'oponopono, while it is a social practice for resolving conflict, it also functions as a powerful form of self-reflection and emotional cleansing, requiring a mindful and honest examination of one's role in a conflict. That last bit I can agree to. That applies definitely to the proper Hawaiian Ho'oponopono as well as to the shortcut westernized version of it. Then the Hawaiians, they have the lomi lomi massage. More than just a physical therapy, lomi lomi is a spiritual practice. Practitioners use flowing rhythmic strokes with deep intention and prayer to release physical tension and emotional blockages, promoting a sense of harmony between the body and spirit. This requires both the practitioner and the recipient to be fully present and mindful. And the Hawaiians put a huge emphasis on living with the aloha spirit. The Hawaiian word aloha is often translated simply as hello or goodbye, or it's sometimes translated as love as well. But its deeper meaning encapsulates the core of Hawaiian spirituality. It is the breath of life, which is in Hawaiian called ha, and the presence of life, which is called alo. To live with aloha is to be mindfully present with and show kindness to others and the world around you. I'd like to add to that, they are very, very strongly connected to nature. I think I mentioned that they have different names for different waters, different flows of the water, different clouds, different weather, different winds. They pay a huge attention to what is happening in nature, and they are proud of the land. They are very concerned about treating their land properly, looking after it well, and there is a strong emphasis on looking well after our planet. So the sources with regards to the Hawaiians are the Wellness Tourism magazine. There is an article about ancient Hawaiian practices for modern healing, and there is a source that is called U Calgary Journal Hosting, and there is some piece called Mindfulness and the Aloha Response. I add 2 book tips as well. One is, if you do want to read up on the modernized Ho'oponopono, get Joe Vitale's Zero Limits book, or find a material by Ihaleakala Hugh Len. And the second book is The Shamanic Mind by Jonathan Hammond, which is going a lot into the Hawaiian ways. A very great book to read on the subject. Next, let's travel to China. While Buddhism and Taoism are often associated with meditation, their development in China was heavily influenced by indigenous philosophical traditions. One of that is the Taoism or Taoism. This ancient Chinese philosophy emphasizes living in harmony with the Tao, or in Western words, the way, which is the natural order of the universe. Practices like Qigong involve gentle movement and breath work to cultivate Qi, the life energy, a practice deeply rooted in present moment awareness and the interconnectedness of the self with nature. A core concept is Wu Wei, I hope I pronounced that right, also known as effortless action, which requires a mindful state of being rather than forced effort. Then there is Zhuo Wang, again Please mind my pronunciation if you're Chinese. Zhu Wang is sitting in oblivion. It's a Taoist meditation practice. Zhu Wang is a state of deep concentration where the practitioner forgets or obliterates the self, the body, and the outside world. This is a profound form of present moment awareness where the mind is emptied and becomes a mirror of the universe. There are two sources again for the Chinese. The first one is a publication called Frontiers, and the piece is the effects of a Chinese Buddhist meditation tradition, the impact of nature observation and literary creation. And the second one is Guangzhou Kung Fu with the title The Origins of Meditation in China. Our journey takes us to Africa next. Indigenous African spiritual practices are incredibly diverse, with thousands of different ethnic groups and traditions. However, many share common themes of holistic well-being, community connection, and a focus on the present moment within a larger cosmic order. There are a lot of ceremonial dances and drumming in African culture. Many African traditions use rhythmic drumming and dance to induce a trance-like or meditative state. This is not for individual escape, but for community healing, connection to the spirit world, and releasing emotional and physical blockages. The repetition of the rhythm and movement focuses the mind, creating a collective mindfulness that strengthens the community bond. Then there's an example from the Yoruba in Nigeria that is called Ifa and Ori. Please mind my pronunciation if you're Nigerian. The Yoruba tradition of Ifa places great importance on the concept of Ori, which means head, but also refers to one's spiritual essence, personal destiny, and inner consciousness. Daily meditative practices involving one's Ori are used to gain insight, manage emotions, and live in alignment with one's destiny. This is a form of contemplative self-reflection aimed at cultivating good character and equanimity. Communal healing and storytelling is very common as well. Healing in many African cultures is a communal process, not an individual one. Storytelling, proverbs, and rituals are used to provide guidance and psychological support. These practices require deep listening and a mindful presence, where the community comes together to help an individual find balance and well-being. And again, I have two sources here. The first one is some academic paper, which is entitled Ifa and Mindfulness, two distinct practices with parallel concepts to improve mental health. This academic paper provides a direct comparison between Yoruba Ifa principles and modern mindfulness, highlighting the shared focus on self-awareness and emotional regulation. And the second one is an article with the title Healing Practices and Traditions from Across the African Diaspora. This article discusses how rituals, ancestral communion, and the use of music and dance are central to African healing, all of which are practices that foster a present moment, holistic state of being. And the last culture we're looking at in the episode are the Indigenous Australian cultures. The spiritual traditions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are among the oldest continuous cultures on Earth. Their connection to country being the land, sea, and sky is a living, breathing part of their identity and spirituality, and their practices are deeply intertwined with this relationship. There is a practice of Dadirri, mind my pronunciation again, if you're an Aboriginal Australian, and Dadirri refers to deep listening. This is a profound practice of inner, quiet and still awareness brought to wider attention by Elder Miriam Rose Ungumar or Ungumar Bauman. Dadirri is about being fully present and listening, not just with your ears, but with your whole being. And it's about listening to the land, to the stories of the elders, and to the wisdom within. It is a form of deep contemplation that fosters peace, inner calm, and a reconnection with one's spiritual self. Then they have songlines and dreaming. Songlines are ancestral stories that describe the routes taken by creator beings in the dreaming, which is the spiritual creation period. These narratives are passed down through songs, stories, and art. The act of singing the land is a form of walking meditation and mindful connection, where an individual or a group traces the paths of their ancestors, reinforcing their connection to country and their history. And the Indigenous Australians, the Aboriginals, they use a lot of ceremonies and art. Aboriginal art is not just a visual representation, it's a spiritual and educational tool. The act of creating and reading the symbols of sand paintings or on bark requires a deep meditative focus. Similarly, ceremonies involving dance, music, and body paint are mindful rituals that connect individuals to the spiritual realm and their ancestral totems. There are two sources again. First one is an article with the title of Meditation in Dreamtime, Meditation Practices of Aboriginal Australians. And this article explores various Aboriginal meditation practices, including Dadirri and their connection to the dreaming and the land. The second source is the mention of the Miriam Rose Foundation. This foundation, established by Elder Miriam Rose Ungunmer Bauman, apologize for the pronunciation again, is a key source of understanding Dadirri and its significance for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. Across all these different diverse cultures we have visited on the journey within the episode, we see common threads: awareness of the present moment, connection with nature, holistic health that is damn much more needed again nowadays, not just the one for all pharma approach, hint poke, deep listening and repetition, whether through rhythm, breath, or ritual. These are not isolated individual acts, but often communal, relational, and spiritual practices. It is crucial that we approach these traditions with respect. They are not tools to be borrowed lightly or commercialized. Instead, they offer us valuable insights into the universality of mindful awareness and how different cultures have woven it into daily life, healing, and community. Mindfulness and meditation are not confined to any one culture. They are part of our shared human story, expressed in countless ways across the globe. As we explore and practice mindfulness and meditation in our modern lives, let's do it with gratitude, with humility, and with respect, acknowledging the wisdom of those who came before us. I find it really fascinating to see that there are such similarities between all those different cultures from across the globe. Native Americans, Pacific people, the Hawaiians and others. We've got the Chinese, we've got the Japanese that haven't been mentioned there, but they have a very specific way of being as well, and their different practices. Then the Australians and the people from Africa. There's so many similarities, and that makes me think there must have been one source a long time back, one single source where all these cultures derived their knowledge from. And that is always the big question. Where is this source from, or who is the source? And that gets us to the end of our explorations today in the episode of Exploring Brain and Mind. Share and like it if you found it interesting. Subscribe and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and tune in again to the next episode. Thank you for listening.